According to the new reporting by CNN, Kremlin has dramatically increased personal security around Vladimir Putin, installing surveillance systems in the homes of close aides as part of new measures prompted by a wave of assassinations of Russia's top military command and fears of coup, according to a report from European intelligence agency obtained by CNN. Putin also fears a coup from his inner circle, and focus is on Sergei Shoigu, former Russia's defense minister. What is your take on this another paranoia from the Kremlin? Also, they fear a possible assassination by a cheap, low-cost drone.
Well, this is always how it is with dictators, and with dictators, they fear their own people more than they do any enemy. So I imagine that Putin and his closest advisors recognize that people are unhappy with what's going on. That he has ruined Russia, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to get any better. So, and of course, there is no traditional retirement plan for a dictator. He can't just go live in Valdai or somewhere else on the Black Sea coast, Sochi, for the rest of his days and enjoy his retirement. That's not going to happen. He's going to be for the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, and so I can imagine that they are concerned. But it's interesting to me also that the intelligence agencies would choose to release this information publicly. So there's a reason for that. I don't know what it is, but I think it does exploit the paranoia that I think Putin has. He's always had, and I think this will exacerbate that.
Let's also get back to U.S. Has U.S. already lost all leverage over Ukraine, and with these negotiators incompetent, as you just mentioned, do you still consider U.S. an ally of Ukraine?
Well, millions of Americans are supporters of Ukraine for sure, but unfortunately, I don't see the current U.S. administration doing anything to help Ukraine. They seem to take the side of the Kremlin constantly. They echo Kremlin talking points still, which is unbelievable to me. I mean, it was just a couple of weeks ago when our vice president bragged that their proudest accomplishment was stopping the aid to Ukraine. I mean, but it's unbelievable that an American vice president would say that. But unfortunately, that's where we are. The Secretary of Defense, Mr. Hegseth, doesn't go to the normal meetings anymore where they talk about aid for Ukraine. So it's hard to consider this administration as an ally of Ukraine. But I would say most of the Congress supports Ukraine. Most Americans support Ukraine. I still see it and hear it all the time. And that I'm looking forward to our own midterm elections in November, where hopefully there will be Democratic control of at least part of the Congress. That will change things somewhat, I believe.
Let's also cover U.S.-Israel war against Iran and the outcome of this campaign. What is your personal take on this and your position on results of this war, main successes and main weaknesses revealed by this campaign?
So, first, this is very uncomfortable for me to be critical of my own government in a war, but almost nobody believes anything that the administration says, the secretary says, the president, on how they describe things. I think the president really desperately wants to get out of this mess as quickly as he can. There's enormous pressure building in the U.S. because of the impact of the war on gas prices, on inflation, and of course, millions of Americans voted for him because he said no more wars, going to fix inflation, we're going to end the war in Ukraine in 20, all these things. And obviously none of these things has happened. And so there's a huge amount of pressure building on the president, and he would like to get out of this mess that he has created. But part of the problem is that they can't even acknowledge the actual situation. The president keeps talking about, Iran has no navy, they have no air force, we destroyed it, but yet Iran still controls who goes through the strait. Iran still has enriched uranium. The regime did not change. You have different people, but it's still the same regime and maybe even more hardline. And Iran still has the ability to hit targets in UAE, for example. So I don't see a positive outcome soon. Now it could be that what the U.S. Navy has been tasked to do, their blockade of Iranian ports, that puts a lot of pressure on Iran. There's no doubt about that. If they're not able to export oil anywhere, and if they're not able to collect tolls from ships passing through the strait, then the domestic situation inside Iran will get much worse. So there's pressure on the other side too. So the president could be right here. So I guess it comes down to which side blinks first. Is the pressure on the U.S. side greater than what's on the Iranian side? What role will China play? The president goes to China in about a week or a few days. And I think that the Chinese, of course, depend on oil coming out of the Gulf. They could have a role to play here in changing things. Otherwise, I think we're going to be stuck in this situation for a while. And the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Navy, special operators, they'll continue to be ready to launch more strikes if tasked to do so. But this is expensive, and you've got people out there just waiting. I don't know which way it's going to go. The enemy always has a vote. The president declared what I think is a fake ceasefire, and the Iranians don't go along with it. So we're going to have to see.
You just mentioned that this becomes so-called war of attrition for both sides, and the outcome would be defined by which side is ready to hang on more time. But don't you think that Iran is ready to sacrifice much more rather than US with midterms elections looming in the upcoming months and President Trump being pushed by his Republican allies to do something to solve these problems before this getting even worse right before midterms?
Yeah, that's the key. That's what I mean when I say which side blinks first. The Iranians, at least it looks to me, they act as if they have time on their side. What I don't know, I don't have a feel for the pressure inside Iran. It looks like they are firmly in control, but I don't know. So at least from the outside, it looks like the Iranians are doing things as if they have as much time as they need.
Also, Professor Robert Pape says this US-Israel war against Iran this is the biggest failure for US since the Vietnam War. Do you share this assessment?
Well, certainly, all of the strategic objectives that the president laid out in the weeks before and since, that were more like justifications, almost none of them have been accomplished. at enormous cost. We now have a situation that we did not have 2 months ago before the war. Oil was moving through the strait. That Iran was not stopping anybody. Now they control the strait. They still have the enriched uranium. You have a regime still in place. Iranian people still under control of the regime. So I don't know how the administration can claim anything other like that somehow that they're winning. The fact that they have destroyed so much Iranian capability is not relevant to the fact of who controls the strait, who's in charge, who has nuclear material.
Let's also cover interesting article by The Economist with title How China Hopes to Win from This War in Iran. And this is interesting wording here, quote, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. What is your reaction to this and US-Israel war against Iran, and how does this affect China's position around the globe?
So the Chinese, of course, are watching closely because they have an interest in getting the oil that comes out of the Gulf. I mean, they are, I think, the biggest customer of oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf. So they obviously will be looking for other sources, whether it's from Russia or elsewhere, to meet their requirements. But they have an interest in how this plays out. I can imagine that countries are working directly with Iran to find ways to bypass, to pay and get the oil that they need. I can imagine some of that's happening, but I don't know that. This meeting between President Trump and President Xi coming up in a few days, I think, will be very important, and this will be part of the conversation those two leaders will have. Because China will want to see an end to this conflict. But at the same time, they are helping Iran with some intelligence, with some components, not much, but I believe, like Russia, China is actually helping Iran. And then, of course, the Chinese are watching closely what our Navy, what our Air Force are able to do, what kind of capabilities we have. And I suspect they also are paying close attention to how much of our ammunition we are expending. How many Tomahawks, how many Patriot, how many other weapons have been expended. That's them. We would be doing the same thing, by the way, building the intelligence picture of your potential adversary.
And final topic for today, US withdrawal from Germany and conflict between President Trump and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. So US Department of Defense plans to withdraw 5,000 troops from Germany amid a conflict between President Trump and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz over the war with Iran. How could this influence NATO, US relations with European allies, and do we still have NATO alliance?
We do still have NATO. The alliance has been through a lot worse times throughout its history. So I have confidence that the alliance will still be standing after the Trump administration is gone. But certainly some countries have not done what they're supposed to do, and that leaves them vulnerable to these criticisms by the United States. Germany is not one of those countries. Germany did not restrict anything that we were trying to do. That was Spain and Italy. But the president, of course, has always been critical of Germany, and he was offended by the German Bundeskanzler saying that U.S. was being humiliated by Iran and that we clearly did not have a strategy. And now some people, even Germans, have criticized Merz for being so blunt, which is kind of the German way. But Mr. Trump is so thin-skinned that he has, I believe that the timing of this decision was tied directly to his desire to seem to punish Merz. for saying that. I think the decision had already been made at some point, or they've been working on this as a force posture review for some time. But I think that they deliberately timed it to look like punishment. This is going to hurt us, the United States, much more than it will hurt Germany. Um, those troops are not in Germany to protect Germans. They're part of the U.S. contribution to NATO, but they also are part of our ability to project power into Africa and to the Middle East. Um, and it's important for our readiness because we always are going to be fighting alongside allies. And so you have to train and work with them. And it's just a very short-sighted decision by the administration that's going to hurt us more than it will hurt the Germans. That it's interesting, people talk about 5,000, but what we're talking about is not just 5,000 out of 35,000. It's the only combat brigade that we have permanently in Germany. It's the Stryker Regiment, which is a very, very good combat unit, very mobile, lots of firepower, lots of infantry, able to move very quickly. And that's the brigade that they're going to move out of Germany. So that's a big reduction in capability. Now, it looks to me that this is not tied to any particular strategy that improves America's defensive posture, for example. I don't know how this helps us. If they move this regiment to Poland or Romania, at least keep it in Europe, then the damage is not as significant, although it will be a long time before they would have bases and training areas in Romania or Poland that are ready, that are equal to what the unit already has in Bavaria. If they send it back to the States or inactivate it, that would be a dramatic reduction in deterrent capability and a huge mistake.